Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Homeschool Minnesota. My name is Dayle and I'm so happy to have Ginny Yurich back on the podcast today. It's just so fun to have her here. Hi, Ginny. How are you?
I'm doing so well. I'm so excited for this book launch. We're
I'm
one week
excited
out
too.
when we're recording this.
I can't even believe that it's coming up so quickly. It's been just such an enjoyable read. I'm excited to have you on to talk about homeschooling. You're doing it right by just doing it. Her newest book that is coming out next week on the 20th. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. You guys need to get in there and get it. It is so good. It is for, I always tell people it's for the mom who's thinking about homeschooling but isn't quite sure. This will help you answer those questions. It's for the mom who's been doing it for just a few years and is like, am I doing it right? And then it's for the mom who's been doing it for a long time going, should I continue doing this? It's
Yes.
something for everybody in there. So it's just a great, if you forgot a Mother's Day gift for somebody important, this is a good one to get them. But thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on, Ginny.
I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be talking about homeschooling. We say it's the best decision we've ever made as a family, even though there's hard days and things like that. But you really can't, the time with your kids is something that you can't get back. And
Yeah.
if all outcomes are equal, and I would say that all outcomes, in this case are often better, but if all
Yes.
outcomes even are equal, then at least you got to have all of that time together. I mean, it really does go by quickly. And then you really have this robust set of memories and foundational
Yeah.
relationships that you've built over the years.
Yeah. It's just the fruit of homeschooling is beyond compare in my mind. Just tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book. What was the thought behind it?
Really passionate about homeschooling. As our kids have
Mhm.
gotten older here, we've been homeschooling for a long time at this point. I feel like it starts when they're born. You're doing
Yeah.
schooling since they're born. So I would say we're 16 years in, but technically we're 11 years in. And it was a decision that we made at the very beginning because I had been a public school teacher and I saw a lot of the developmental things that didn't line up. These kids
Mm.
are being pushed to do so much schoolwork at such young ages and it didn't line up. It didn't line up with how kids are wired, how they're wired by God to
Mhm.
really be exploratory learners and to be outside and to be moving their bodies. And so I was teaching at the time, Dale, when they made this transition to full day kindergarten. Kindergarten for me was a half a day, couple hours. It was just mainly play based. And there's research that shows that 10% of the school day in generations gone by were for academics for kindergartners. So it might have been like 18 minutes of
Yeah.
academics. The rest
Yeah.
of it was PlayStations. And they really flip flopped. And we saw that. I saw that as being a public school teacher, that flip flop. And we also felt that if a child is out of the home for 8 hours, which that's really what it
It's
is.
a
If
long
there's a
time.
bus ride, depending on where you live, the bus comes at 8, doesn't come back till 4:30. That's a
Mhm.
full work day. How can you be the primary influence in your child's life? That's starting at age 5. They come home, they're tired, they're crabby. Now there's homework. So
Mhm.
that was our really impetus into homeschooling. And we were nervous. I think, like any family, you're nervous. You're going to do it wrong. You don't really know that there's all these different philosophies of education that people have. Like
Mhm.
you possibly know nothing. You just think, well, I'm just going to do this at home. We're going to be together. And you morph along the way. But one of the biggest questions that people ask is, am I doing this right? And I believe wholeheartedly that if you are the type A mom that is using a curriculum that, you're really structured, you're doing it right. And if you're the type of mom that's leaning toward unschooling and learning through
Mhm.
living, you're doing it right. And if you're the type of mom that's doing a co-op or not doing a co-op, or the type of dad, there's homeschool dads that are running. If you're the type of parent that has to work, if you're a single parent, education is so broad. And what we're doing is little by little, our kids are growing into the people that they're meant to become. And it's individual. And so I really wanted to share the message that you're doing it right just by doing it. As
Yeah.
long as you're a parent that loves their kid, there's
Mhm.
always going to be holes, right? There's going to be holes if a kid is in the public school. And I had firsthand experience of that, Dale. I had kids that would come in the high school that didn't know how to divide. They
Yeah.
didn't understand even the concept of division. So every childhood has holes. And the beauty of life is that you get to fill those holes as you see
Yeah.
fit as life goes on. And so you are doing it right just by doing it.
Yeah, I love that. I think the one thing that I've noticed this year is a lot of opposition to homeschooling in a lot of different state governments. In our state, especially, particularly because we're in Minnesota. But I know like Illinois has had those issues, and Connecticut has had those issues.
Why do you
And
think?
well, I think that a lot of it is just I think part of it is just the fact that they are wanting to they can't control the homeschool kid. the homeschool family. There's no government
Right.
oversight of what's actually going on in that homeschool and what parents are teaching their kids. But I also think that our outcomes are better. Our outcomes, even if they're just marginally better, they're still better. And I
Yeah.
think they're not just marginally better, let's be honest. For the most part, they're a lot better.
Well, and when you talk about outcomes, it's like, okay, we could talk about this
Yeah.
academic outcomes, and there's
Hmm.
definitely research on that. But
There's
really,
so
if you
much
look
more.
on a whole, how are
Hmm.
children doing? How are
Yeah.
teens doing? They are
Hmm.
struggling. And that is that mental health crisis epidemic that's going on
Absolutely.
with kids. So that's a big outcome. That's interesting. Do you think that because homeschooling has gotten larger and bigger, especially since COVID, it became a little less taboo and easier to talk
Yeah.
about? Do you feel like that's kind of freaking out these government officials a little bit?
I wonder if it's just that, and I think that I know funding. There's been some funding issues in some schools, and that money always talks. And I also think that part of it is just that they're not like homeschooled kids for the most part. I would say the greater number are independent thinkers, independent learners. They know how to get into things. They're problem solvers. They're community oriented. They're able to work with just about anybody. They're able to associate with people. They're socialized so well within so many different, they feel comfortable with preschoolers, their own age,
Yeah,
and adults. They just feel comfortable. They know how to
that's right.
fit. They know they don't have a sense of their own importance. They just know how to work in situations that can be difficult. And I think that's intimidating to people. I think
Yeah.
that it causes problems because you put that up against kids who in our state, it was just released that not even 50% of the kids who graduate from high school right now can read or write proficiently, and they can't do, and less than that can do math proficiently. And so, and they're graduating high school, but that's
Wow.
not homeschooling. And I think just if you're just looking at that, that's
Right.
intimidating because these kids are going to the same colleges, and that's just a stark difference. And I think they're trying to
Right.
level the playing field a little bit, and I don't think that's fair.
It's interesting what you said, Dale, though, about the being able to fit, because I think one of the misconceptions is that there was a time period, and it wasn't all that long ago, when homeschooling was illegal in a lot of places. And so we
Right.
know different families where they still felt the conviction and the calling to homeschool, but they would
Yeah.
stay inside all day. And they weren't
Hmm.
out in different groups and socializing and being part of different opportunities in the community. They would pull their car out of the driveway, the kids would duck down, they would pull back
Yeah.
in, and then they would stay inside until all the other kids got home, and it was normal to be out in the neighborhood. And I think that that's where that stigma, it only comes from that. The stigma of sort of the unsocialized homeschooler in some
Yeah.
ways is correct for some families. And that was
Yeah.
the only thing that they could do. That was a necessity. That was how they could homeschool. But it is no
Yeah.
longer that. So when people
No.
are looking at that stigma of unsocialized, that is old news. That is from back in the day when it was illegal in a lot of places and kids were in some ways sheltered. And that was the choice that the parent made. They felt that this is the better choice, even though it's not illegal. We're still going to do it. But things have
Yeah.
changed dramatically since then. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad my kids would have died had I kept them in the house all day. I would have died. It
Yes.
wouldn't have worked for us. So one of the things that you write about in your book, I like the 10, it's like 10 different things to think about when you're homeschooling. I think my favorite chapter, because it's something I've been harping on a lot actually, is you get to leave space for boredom.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want you to talk about the importance of boredom. I want people to hear it from you and not just me all the time. But why is boredom so important for children to experience? Why are we so afraid of that word? Mom, I'm bored.
We are afraid of that word. And I think that we're afraid of it
Mhm.
because in some instances, kids are never bored. And that has been equated with the best parenting. Parents that are
Yeah.
constantly scheduling their kids into this extracurricular and that extracurricular. And that has been synonymous with that's a good parent, someone who is enriching,
Mhm.
enriching, enriching. And this is chapter 3 in the book. You're leaving space for
Yeah.
boredom. And you're right. The premise of the book is what you're doing right before you choose curriculum, before you choose philosophy.
Yes.
What are you doing right just by pulling your kids out of a standardized system that takes up a lot of their time and puts them with an age segregation situation? But the boredom happens naturally because no mother or father, no parent can enrich their child's life every minute of the day. This is very different from what's happening
Exactly.
in a school setting, in an institutional school setting, where the minutes are all pretty much accounted for a lot of reasons. They're accounted for because of the state has to have them be accounted for. I mean, I sat in a school board meeting where they were talking about recess, and kids get hardly any recess here in Michigan, but it was 20 2 minutes for this and 4 minutes for that, and every minute is accounted for. So when you pull your kids out of that system, you may feel like you're doing it wrong because you cannot
Mhm.
possibly do that. You have all of these other jobs that you have to do, and there's multiple kids. And so the point is that simply by homeschooling, your child is going to be bored sometimes. And that
Mhm.
is one of the most wonderful things that could happen to your child in this day and age, because
Absolutely.
so many things happen when a child is bored. First of all, they learn to create. They learn to create something out of nothing. And we're here. We're really in a world that does not cater to the 30-year career anymore, that doesn't cater
Mhm.
to a linear path in adulthood. They say by 2035, 75% of the population will either be an entrepreneur or have their hand in several bags, doing several different kinds of jobs. I mean, 2035 is the future that our kids will be living in. And so they
Mhm.
have to be able to adjust and to draw from their own inner resources. And when a child is told what to do all of the time, they don't have any of that. They don't have self reliance. They don't know what to do next. And this is coming up all the time, Dayle. I know you hear about it. The professors are
Yeah.
saying at the colleges, these kids don't know what to do. They can't make simple decisions without calling home to their
Yep.
parents. This man named Chip Layton wrote this book called What Time is Noon? What Time is Noon? And the whole premise of the book is the funny texts that teens send their parents because they don't know this or they don't know that, which has always been the case, right? You don't know what you don't
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
some of them were in there. It's like, a kind of a joke, but also a little bit insightful, where these kids will be texting their parents from college and they would say, how do I get the laundry out of the washing machine? Do I just use my hands? And so they're missing these key components. And
Wow.
boredom, it is that bridge from nothing to creativity. And additionally, I just read this
Mhm.
wonderful book called The 5 Types of Wealth. It's by a man named Sahil Bloom. It just came out. It's like a international bestseller. And he has these graphs in there, Dale, of your time and how it's spent as you age. So, for example, as you age, your time with your children gets less and less. In fact,
Yeah.
95% of the time you spend with your children happens before they're 18. It might be 90. I think it's
Man, think
95.
about that in
I
homeschooling.
know. And 70 to
Yeah.
75% is by the time they're 12. So, one of the graphs, though, and
Wow.
I've never thought about this, the thing that increases the most as you age is your time spent alone. That's what increases.
Wow.
So, your time with your coworkers is going down. Your time with your spouse usually goes up, and your time by yourself really goes up. And so, we have to be okay to be by ourselves and to be able to draw from
Yeah.
our own inner resources. And boredom also is the time where kids learn, what do I like? What do I love? What lights me up? And they have to have that too,
Mhm.
because otherwise you're really lost. You hit age 18 and you don't know about yourself. You don't know what your hobbies are, what your interests are, what you like, what you don't like, what
Yeah.
doesn't fit. And this is big. It's helping protect, I think, against screen time. If kids have a bunch of hobbies, there really is a lot to unpack with boredom. And so the
Yeah.
advice would be, and this comes from Kim John Payne, who wrote Simplicity Parenting. It comes from the Love and Logic books, where when your kids whine, you just have to be boring and repetitive in response. You can be empathetic. It's okay to be bored.
Yeah.
You just have it on repeat.
Yeah.
It's okay to be bored. I trust you'll find something to do. Just have a couple little sentences that you say over and over again, and they're going to get bored with your response and they're going to go find something to do. And that is so good for them. There's a book called Beyond Winning, which is about toxic youth sports culture. So that's another situation where we're
Yeah.
filling the time. And in that
Yes.
book, it says, when your kids are bored, you have not failed. So put it up on the fridge.
That right there, I think, is the key, is that we equate boredom with, oh, we're not parenting correctly. Our children are, they need us. And
Yeah.
in some ways that kind of feeds that little bit of insecurity in a mom where, oh, they need me. I'm just so important kind of a thing. And you are,
Yeah, but
but
we're trying to work
allowing
ourselves.
them,
You are important, but
yeah,
our job is to
work
work
ourselves out
ourselves
of a
out of a
job.
job. So you are very
I always
important.
tell
Yes, you
people,
are passing on
yeah,
worldview and values.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I always tell people that
What do you always tell
being
people?
a
I know I
parent is
interrupted. I want to hear.
bittersweet. That's okay. It's bittersweet.
Yeah.
If you do it right, your kids will grow up and not need you, but they will want you. And
Right.
there's a big difference. Like, they
Yes.
aren't going to need you to
Yes.
hold their hand and walk through life, but they're going to want you to be there when they have trials or when they have celebrations. They're going to want you there. And so
Yeah.
if you do it correctly, you work yourself out of a situation where you're constantly in your child's life, but you can work yourself into a situation where you're there because they care about you, they respect you, they love you. And it's
Yeah.
just such a great blessing. Yeah. You
Yeah.
talk a lot. I love your first chapter. You know, you're talking about learning through life, learning through living. And
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about like your guys' experience of transitioning from your mentality of transitioning as a public school teacher to a homeschool. And I like how I like John Holt too. So I like to, I like his quotes and things. And you talk about like just the different kind of education that you decided to choose. Could you talk a little bit about just setting, because there's a lot of newer homeschoolers, just kind of your journey of figuring out what worked for you and your family.
Well, I think it changes. I think that homeschool changes year over year. And that's one of the things that can be scary. And that's one of the things that you might experience and feel like you're doing it wrong. Because if you grew up in a standardized situation where you went to K to 12 and basically it was the same thing every single year, almost to the T, right? It's like, okay, eventually you get a locker. And eventually your
Mhm.
teachers change. But for the most part, hour by hour, you've got first hour, second hour. But for the most part, this K to 12 education is very systematic. And there's field day and there's graduation and there's these different parts of it. And so when you become a homeschooling family, like for me, I sort of assumed it would be the same way. It's first grade, second grade. But every single year, you are growing, and possibly every single month or every single week, you are growing as a person, as the parent, and you're thinking things through and you're reading new things and you're being exposed to different philosophies or what is my friend doing. And so there is this adjustment of things that challenge you. And that's what happened in my case. I had one view of education. It was the systematic, linear view of education. That was all I had. And then I started to read different books and see what other people were doing. And I would make small adjustments here or there. Try this, try that, try. So I would say maybe one of my first ones was I had a schedule, and there would be times where our kids were playing out in the yard, and I would have called them back in to do their math. But then I read a book, Free to
Mhm.
Learn by Dr. Peter Gray, who says kids are
Mhm.
biologically designed by God. He doesn't say that part, but that's what I say. They are biologically designed to
Exactly.
self educate. And so when our kids are out playing in the yard all together and they're getting along, I stopped calling them back in for the thing that I thought that they should do. So these small changes start to happen and you grow. You grow in your trust of your children, you grow in your trust of yourself. And doesn't it make sense that it should change? That means you're
Yeah.
growing and evolving and you are modeling to your kids that this is how you live life. It's a little bit of adjustments here and there. That didn't work, or I don't like that,
Yeah.
or I'd like to have a little bit more organized kitchen. I'd like to have a different way that the day is structured. I'd like to get outside in the morning because I just learned that morning
Yeah.
sunlight is good for our health and for our stress levels. Like, you hear these different things and you try them. And that is what leads to a good, fulfilling life. And so when your homeschool is adjusting, that is
Mhm.
not a failure. That actually is a really amazing thing that's happening right in front of your kids. They are learning, oh, yeah, I don't have to be tied to one thing forever. I can learn something
Yeah.
new and try and incorporate it. And that's
Mhm.
just one small part of learning through living. And also part of the book is modeling. You are modeling
Yes.
how to craft a life to your kids. That's one of the chapters. You are modeling how to step out into something new. And this
Mhm.
is very much in contrast to kids who are, like we talked about at the beginning, shuffled through a set of predetermined things that an adult has decided for them.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about check boxes, which I really like because I love lists. I like checked
Yeah.
boxes. I like it to be orderly and I like things to work for me. And homeschooling really challenged me in so many ways. And it helped me to loosen up a little bit and to enjoy the process, but that at the end of the day, you didn't have boxes to check and it was really complicated for you to kind of go, did I succeed? Did I do everything the way I should be doing it? And
Yeah. Did I
yeah,
do
I
it right?
appreciated that. Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
can't do it wrong. I was telling Ginny before the podcast, one of the things that I remember doing is going through all of school and talking to my kids and teaching them and I was like I'm doing this thing and I was so like trying not to miss anything, and I took my oldest 17-year-old to go get her SAT test. She had to sign for it and they said, okay, just sign your name here, and she looked at me and I'm like, oh, I forgot to teach her cursive. She didn't know how to sign her name. And I was like, well, okay. She got her
It's
SAT. It was
It's
fine.
such a great story. It's such a great story because this Matt Boudreau that I've talked to several times, he talks about, and they have this documentary that he's a part of, and they talk about this just in case learning. That you
Yes.
spend all this
Yeah.
time learning just in case, just in case.
Yeah.
And he says that Counterpoint to that is just-in-time learning. And she did fine. She didn't know how to
Yeah.
sign her name then,
Yeah.
but I would
Aced
imagine
the
that she learned
SAT,
very
but didn't sign her
quickly.
name.
I would imagine that very quickly she learned. And then for the other kids, you made sure
Yeah.
that they knew how to
They
sign their
can
names.
sign their name.
So
Yeah.
it's just in time. They learn just in time,
Yep.
maybe like a hair late for your oldest, but that's the part of life. And it's not
She
like
still
every
graduated,
single,
became a nurse.
there you go. There you go. And it's not like every single child graduates from high school with every single piece that we hope for them. There's no
Yeah.
perfection out there. Everyone has
No,
holes.
I love that. I love that. You know, this book gives you guys, just so you know, moms and dads, I always forget the homeschool dads. I'm trying to remember, you guys know that I love you. But this gives you permission to just rest and enjoy the process. I love that about this book, is that it just gives you permission to slow it down in a world where everything seems to be stepping up and going at warp speed. This book gives you permission
Yeah.
to just be like, no, 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 no. Take a deep breath and just be there for your kids. Is that something you thought about a lot, Ginny, while you were writing this book?
Yes, because I've read a lot about technology. We are not keeping up with AI. We never will. The computers
Mm-mm.
never sleep. And so instead of trying to keep up with something that you can't keep up with, the better route is to do something different. The jobs of the future are relational. They are for kids who have relational competency and social skills and things like that. And this
Mhm.
is really going to behoove your children to be different than someone that's a part of this rat race that you can't win anyway. You're not going to win.
Yeah.
These computers are so fast in the way that they process things, and it's getting
Mhm.
faster. Is quantum computing and generative artificial intelligence. And those who work deeply in those fields will say people want humanity and they want to have
Yeah.
conversation, and they're sick of the screens. And so you really do behoove yourself to slow it down and to have a little bit more humanity and to have emotional intelligence and to have emotional health. Emotional health and
Yeah.
well-being is going to take your kids so far. And that is something that happens just from the nature of homeschooling. It doesn't matter what curriculum you choose. It doesn't depend on any of that. It just happens because your kids are out of that push, push, push. I've talked to so many people who say even these kids is 7, 8 years old are talking about their college resumes.
Mhm.
What decision
That's
should I make that's
crazy.
going to look good on my college resume as a second
Wow.
grader? And that all, especially by the time they get to high school, all of their decisions are filtered through that. Hobbies? What hobbies? Everything I do is filtered through
Mhm.
this lens of college acceptance, and college acceptance does not guarantee a good life. So, yeah, this
Mm-mm.
is a really big thing. It's permission to slow down. It's almost like that's better. It's not even just permission. It's like
Mhm.
a message that no, that the better route is to slow down, because if kids know how to be happy, if kids know how to be bored, if kids know how to be
Mhm.
fulfilled, that's wiring their brain during childhood. You cannot have 12 years of schooling where you're stressed, 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 trying to get to this one goal. And then all of a sudden your brain is fine to be happy. Your brain
Yeah.
is fine to be content. No, you have wired into your brain this highly stressful motivation style that's hard to get rid
Mhm.
of. Yeah, so it's more
Mhm.
than permission. It's a charge. Do it
Yeah,
differently.
absolutely. And I think that when we think about, you talked earlier about mental health and the anxiety that is on
Yeah.
society today, this to perform and to be something that they can't potentially ever be. It's just, what are we giving our kids when we're expecting, and when we're building our family time around sports and around all the things and school and homework, and when you think about it, then how much real family time is happening even on the weekends when they've got sports and they've got projects, or homework projects, and all the different things that they have. You maybe get just a few hours a week with your children, and you're supposed to be discipling them and modeling to them and creating family bonds and all these things that you need to be doing, that you're not able to do because society tells you this is what it looks like to be a good parent and this is what it looks like to
Mhm.
have a good education. Just, yeah, I think you're right, it is a mandate. I think that's a great word for it. It's just a mandate to slow it down and to just be present as a family and as a parent. What are some last things that you just want to, like, if you could, just one little nugget that you want to give to everybody that is listening today? Just
I
one
do not
little.
regret I don't regret homeschooling for 1 second. There is not one
Yeah.
second that I look back and regret. I'm gonna end with one story because it's not in the book. It happened after I wrote the book, and so this is one
Okay.
that's not in there, and I haven't shared it yet, although I'm probably gonna start plugging it in when I speak. But one of our kids, and I think everybody can relate to this, if you have a kid, one kid or several kids, sometimes you've got that one kid that you're like, "Oh, this might not work for them." So we've got this one, and It's like she had a hard time spelling, and she had a harder time with the schoolwork. And there were times where I was like, I'm not quite sure how this is going to turn out. And she says I can share the story. She thinks it's funny. But I was recording a video. It was the first ever opportunity I got to kind of record a video for this company to share their materials with our audience. And they do these science kits for kids. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. This
Mm.
is great. We homeschool. And so we get these science kits in the mail, and I'm videotaping the kids. And she was, in later elementary. And she says, I am so excited about this new science kit. It is called Chemistry for Spies. And she meant to say chemistry. So when you're talking about the girl that doesn't know how to sign her name, I'm like, no, it's not chemistry, it's chemistry. So that was just sort of like one little touch point of this is kind of how it was going all along. And I was really doubting like this might not work for her. And we did no testing in Michigan. There's obviously different rules in different states. You got to follow your state laws, but we didn't do any testing. We did the curriculum. We did a lot of learning through life and just going through the books. And when she turned 14, she told me, I want to be a personal trainer. And she had done her own research on personal training. And she said, I want to take this course with this man named Joe Drake. And I think he has the best course, and I want to become certified. And so I signed her up for the course. And she took this course, and she did it on Zoom. And we called the guy to see if she could do it. He said, we've never had anybody this young, but if she's interested, she gets this textbook in the mail. It's like 6 inches thick on personal training. And I
Wow.
see her on, Wednesdays was her class, and she'd be answering the questions. I'd see her she'd off mute, and she'd say, the scapula. I don't even know if that's the right word. Anyway, she knew all of these different, the trapezius, and she's doing all these things. The class ended, and there was a test that she would have to take. We had to go to a testing center so that it was legit. And it's for the National Academy of Sports Medicine. It's like the highest credentialing of physical training. And so I go in, I can't even stay. I have to drop her off and wait in the parking lot. And
Yeah.
it was the first test she ever took. Now she's 15 years old, never taken a test. Used to say chemistry. We struggling with some different school areas, never taken a test. And she comes out with a sheet of paper, nailed it, passed. And so she is 15 years old,
Wow.
certified personal trainer, first test she ever took. And
Man.
you don't know what your story is going to be. You don't.
No.
You can't look at your
Nope.
7-year-old who can't read yet, or your 9-year-old who's really fidgety, and predict like this isn't going to work. It is going to work. It's going to work. And it's
Yeah.
going to work more beautifully than you can ever imagine. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what your
Yeah.
story is going to be. And then you're going to be able to share that story with other people and encourage them. You don't know. So my message is
Yep.
you have to stick with it. You're doing it
That's
right.
so good.
You're doing it right just by doing it. Just by pulling your kids out of that system and giving them a customized education at home that goes with their timeline. You're doing it right. And there is so much to look forward to.
I love that. I love that. What an accomplishment. Congratulations to her. Wow. And
Yes.
I think that's the cool thing about homeschooling is that we aren't writing our kids' story. God is writing their story. And all we just
Yeah.
sometimes just need to get out of the way
Right.
and let them
Right.
just
And
do their
we
thing.
texted her teacher. We texted her
Yeah.
teacher, that Joe Drake that taught the course, and said
Yeah.
she passed. And he said, she is such an example to my own young daughters. I hope they're just like her when they get older.
Well, that is there's a
It's
mom
amazing.
moment right there. Yeah, good job.
Yeah. And I
That's
didn't do
wonderful.
anything, really, right?
No,
All
yeah,
I did was kind of stick with it. That's it. I stuck with
yeah.
it through my doubts, and that's it. And I helped to resource her in what she was interested in, which she got interested in because she had times when she was bored. That's just how it works.
Yeah,
So stick with it,
yeah,
moms and dads. You're doing it right
yeah.
just by
Don't
doing
give
it.
up. Don't give up. Well,
Mhm.
thank you, Ginny. I'm really excited for your book. Again, May 20th, it's being released. You can get it now, pre-order on Amazon. Don't miss out, you guys. This is a great, great book. Ginny's an amazing writer. And if you don't
Thank
know,
you.
for those of you who live under a rock somewhere, she has a podcast called 1,000 Hours Outside that is amazing. And I love that podcast. And I love all the different things that she does and the challenge that she does 1,000 Hours Outside. And she's working her way into working with like nutrition and all the different things that we can do for our kids to make life just so much better for them and give them a really solid start. So I'm so grateful. I'm going to link all of that into the description of this podcast so you can find Ginny in all the different places that she is. And I just want to thank you, Ginny, for all that you're doing for homeschooling families and just the way that you're just challenging us to get outside and then encouraging us with just keep going, So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, Thank you for all you are doing. I know these state organizations do so much for the parents and the families in their states. It's a generational impact. So if you're listening and you're
Yeah,
not, I don't, each state is different, but like become a member, come to all of the things. I want to encourage you because what
please.
you do there impacts generations to come. So join in with any conference, any
Mhm.
event. You want to be a part of that because that's what people did before you in order to make it legal for you. So that's what you're going to be doing, especially because you talked about at the
Exactly.
very beginning that people are coming for the different rights. And there are, as
Yeah.
this homeschooling movement grows, it means less money in the public schools. So there becomes different people that aren't happy with that. So definitely make sure that you're hooked up with Dayle and what they're doing
Yep.
in Minnesota because it really matters a lot.
Yeah, guys, Michelle, I always have the link in the podcast description. But yeah, we definitely could use your guys' support. But they've been wonderful. You guys have been so great, and yeah. So thank you so much, Jenny. We appreciate you, and God bless.
Thank you.